The first time Emily held the orphaned gorilla, he didn't cry, he didn't fight, he didn't even reach for the bottle, he just pressed his tiny face against her jacket and held on, not tightly at first, just enough to feel something solid, just enough to tell everyone in that small quiet room one thing without making a single sound. He had already lost too much to risk losing anything else. His name was Cavi, and in that moment nobody in the room knew whether he was going to make it. He had been brought into the care center earlier that afternoon, found alone near the edge of a protected forest by a ranger who almost walked past him. He was tucked low against the base of a tree, barely moving, coated in dried mud. No mother, no troop, no sound, just a small dark shape that the ranger had to look twice at before realizing it was breathing. The team that received him was experienced and careful. They knew what a traumatized infant looked like. They had seen it before, but there was something about the way Cavi arrived, not panicking, not screaming, just completely still, that made the room go quiet the moment he came through the door. They did everything right. Warm blankets, careful fluids administered slowly, voices kept low, lights kept dim, minimal handling, minimal stimulation, no sudden movements. The veterinarian on duty checked him thoroughly and confirmed what the team already suspected. He was dehydrated, underweight, and cold in a way that went deeper than temperature. His body had been without warmth and contact for too long, not hours, longer than that. But even with everything done correctly, Cavi did not respond the way they hoped. He avoided eye contact. He turned his face away from the bottle every time it came near. He kept pulling his limbs inward, curling smaller and smaller, as if some part of him was still trying to press against a mother who was no longer there. His body had been rescued, but his fear was still somewhere back in that forest, and no amount of correct procedure was going to reach it quickly. That was when Emily came in. She was not the lead caretaker that day. She had come in to check on another patient and ended up staying. She didn't make an entrance. She didn't announce herself or move toward Cavi with purpose. She simply sat down on the floor near him, at a distance that gave him space, and stayed there. She kept her body low and her shoulders relaxed. She let him smell the cloth she held loosely in her hand. She didn't try to make contact. She didn't talk much. She just existed in the room with him, calm and unhurried, as if she had nowhere else to be and no expectations of him at all. For several minutes nothing happened. Then Cavi's small fingers opened. He reached out slowly and touched the sleeve of her jacket. Just the fabric at first, a single cautious touch, like he was checking whether something this solid could disappear. Then his grip tightened, not desperately, not in the panicked way of an animal in pain, just a quiet, deliberate hold, as if something in his nervous system had found a signal it recognized. Not Emily specifically, not a person, something older and simpler than that. A warmth, a stillness, a smell that carried no threat. The vet watching from the doorway later said it was the first voluntary movement Cavi had made since arriving. He wasn't eating yet, he wasn't safe yet, but for the first time since being found, he had chosen to reach towards something instead of away from it. That was the first sign of life, not a heartbeat on a monitor, not a temperature reading returning to normal, but a 3-pound orphaned gorilla deciding against everything his fear was telling him, to hold on. That night the team set up a careful overnight routine. Cavi was placed in a padded nursery enclosure with temperature control, soft surfaces and low ambient sound. The goal was to let him rest, stabilize and begin tolerating the bottle on his own terms. It was a reasonable plan. It was the right plan. It lasted about 40 minutes. Every time Emily left the room, Cavi became restless. Not explosive, not the kind of distress that brings staff running, but a slow, creeping agitation that showed in his breathing, in the way his hands gripped the blanket, in the low sounds he made that weren't quite vocalizations but weren't silence either. Every time Emily came back, his breathing settled within minutes. The vet noted it carefully, and told Emily plainly, "Don't read too much into it yet." Cavi was fragile. He was still in the earliest window of survival. The attachment forming was real, but it was also the attachment of an infant to the nearest available warmth. It was not a bond yet. It was a lifeline. Emily understood that. She was experienced enough to know the difference. But she also stayed through the night, sleeping in the chair beside his enclosure, because sometimes understanding the clinical explanation and doing the right thing anyway are two completely different choices. By morning, Cavi had taken a small amount of formula, not much, but some, and he had slept through the night for the first time. Over the days that followed, something began to build. The team maintained careful, consistent routines, same feeding times, same voices, same gentle approach each time. Cavi began to tolerate more contact. He started taking formula more reliably. His temperature stayed stable. The vet's tone, cautious at first, began to carry something that sounded almost like cautious optimism, but what the team noticed most was something harder to write into a medical chart. Kavi watched Emily's face, not randomly, not the way infants track movement. He watched her the way someone watches a door in an unfamiliar building, checking whether it was going to stay open. Before he accepted the bottle, he looked at her. Before he let another staff member approach, he looked at her. She had become, without anyone deciding it, the thing he checked the world against. He wasn't eating because he was recovering. He was eating because she was there, and the world she occupied felt for the first time like somewhere a small gorilla might survive. On the 7th night, Emily slipped out of the nursery just for a few minutes. It was late, the center was quiet. She had been awake for most of 2 days and she needed water and a few minutes of air. When she came back, the blanket was empty. The nursery door, which had been closed, was open by a few inches, and leading from the enclosure toward the back hallway was a trail of tiny muddy handprints pressed into the floor, each one a little smaller than a human palm, moving in a careful, deliberate line. Emily's heart stopped. She followed them. Where had Kavi gone? And what did he do when he got there? Emily found him in less than a minute. He hadn't gone far. He hadn't tried to escape or find a way outside. He was curled beside her laundry basket at the end of the back hallway, both small hands wrapped around the sleeve of the jacket she'd left hanging there earlier that evening. His eyes were half closed. His breathing was slow. He wasn't in distress. He wasn't searching anymore. He had found what he was looking for. The staff member who helped Emily carry him back didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "He followed your scent." And that was the moment everyone in that building understood that what was happening between this orphaned gorilla and this one caretaker had moved beyond standard infant care. Kavi hadn't wandered. He hadn't panicked. He had made a decision, small and instinctive and completely deliberate, to find the one thing in the world that smelled like safety. The weeks that followed brought real progress. Kavi grew stronger. He started pulling himself upright, climbing the low padded structures in the care room, exploring corners he had previously ignored. His appetite became reliable. His weight climbed steadily. The vet began using words like trajectory and timeline in ways that no longer felt guarded. But through all of it, Emily remained his fixed point. A loud door would send him scrambling back to her side. A new staff member entering the room meant Kavi pressing against her leg until the stranger became familiar. A storm rolling through one evening, just rain and wind. Nothing dangerous had him reaching up with both arms the way infant gorillas reach for their mothers in the wild. And Emily held him without thinking, the way you hold something fragile that has decided, without asking permission, that you are where it belongs. He started copying small things, sitting beside her when she wrote her daily notes, resting one hand on her boot while she talked to the vet, touching her hair with a carefulness that made the whole room go still. These moments were funny and tender and deeply easy to misread. But Emily never misread them. She knew exactly what she was looking at. It wasn't personality. It wasn't a gorilla developing human habits out of affection. It was attachment behavior, ancient, survival-driven, and completely appropriate for an infant who had lost everything and rebuilt his sense of the world around one person's calm. That was also exactly what made it dangerous. One afternoon, a senior caretaker pulled Emily aside and said something she already knew but hadn't yet let herself hear directly. "He can love you," the woman said, "and still need to leave you." Emily nodded. She didn't argue. But that evening, when Kavi fell asleep against her arm, she didn't move for a long time. Because knowing the right thing and being ready for it are never quite the same. The decision didn't come all at once. It came in small, deliberate steps, the way most hard things do when the people involved are trying to do them correctly. The team began reducing Emily's direct role gradually. Other caretakers took over more feedings. Emily stayed behind the glass sometimes instead of in the room. The physical contact shortened. The time between visits stretched. None of it was punishment. None of it was coldness. It was a carefully structured plan designed by people who had done this before and understood what happened to sanctuary animals who never learned to exist without a specific human presence. The goal was not to break the bond. The goal was to teach Kavi, slowly and safely, that the world did not begin and end with one person. Kavi did not take it well at first. He refused a bottle from a caretaker he had accepted for weeks. He sat by the door of the care room and watched it. He searched the space with his eyes in a way the staff recognized immediately. Not panic, but the focused, patient waiting of an animal that has learned someone always comes back, and is now being asked to hold that belief a little longer than feels comfortable. Watching it from the other side of the glass, Emily found it harder than she had prepared herself for. She had worked with rescued animals for years. She understood the necessity. She believed in it completely. And still, every time Kavi looked toward the door and found it empty, something in her chest pulled tight in a way that didn't ease quickly. Then they introduced him to another young rescued gorilla, a female, roughly his age, who had arrived at the sanctuary 2 months earlier and had been slowly cleared for gradual social contact. The introduction was careful and controlled, separate spaces first, then shared space with full staff supervision. No pressure, no forced proximity. Kavi looked at her, then turned and reached for Emily through the glass. It was not aggressive, it was not fearful, it was simply a choice, made clearly and without hesitation. Given the option, he still chose the human who smelled like safety over the gorilla who was a stranger. The staff noted it and adjusted the plan. More time, more patience. These things could not be rushed. But days later, something shifted. Kavi was sitting alone after a feeding when the young female approached and settled quietly nearby. No noise, no contact, just presence. Kavi glanced toward the glass where Emily stood watching. Then he stayed. He didn't move away. He didn't reach for the barrier. He simply sat with another gorilla for the first time, in the particular silence of two animals deciding without drama that the space between them was safe. Emily pressed her hand flat against the glass and didn't say a word, because some moments are too important to interrupt. 2 years is a long time when you are measuring it in growth. Kavi changed in ways that the early photos made almost unbelievable to look at. The fragile mud-coated infant who had arrived curled against a tree became something altogether different, larger, calmer, more certain in his movements. He developed the quiet confidence of a gorilla who had learned, slowly and through real experience, that the world was navigable. He played, he explored, he held his own in the social dynamics of the sanctuary habitat, in ways that made the staff proud in the specific, restrained way of people who know better than to get too attached to outcomes. Emily received updates, photos, written reports with careful clinical language that somehow still managed to carry warmth between the lines. She read every one. She was glad for everyone, and everyone hurt a little, in the way that good endings sometimes do when you were present at the beginning. When the sanctuary finally cleared a supervised visit, Emily drove there on a Tuesday morning without telling many people. There was no camera crew, no planned moment, just Emily, a few staff members who knew the history, and a quiet stretch of habitat on the other side of a safe barrier. Kavi was across the enclosure when she arrived, sitting near the young female he had first tolerated in that careful, uncertain way 2 years earlier, and now moved beside with the ease of long familiarity. He was not looking toward the entrance. He had no reason to expect anything different about that particular Tuesday morning. Emily knelt down near the barrier and waited. For a long moment nothing happened. Kavi stayed where he was. The staff said nothing. Emily said nothing. She had not come here for a dramatic reunion. She had come because she needed to see with her own eyes that he was whole. Then his posture changed. It was subtle, a slight lift of the head, a stillness that was different from resting stillness, the particular quality of attention that moves through an animal's body when something registers below the level of thought. He turned. He looked across the habitat toward the barrier with an expression the staff recognized before Emily did. He walked toward her slowly. No rushing, no distress, just a calm, certain approach, the way you move towards something you are not afraid of losing. He stopped at the barrier. Emily said his name softly, just once. Kavi reached one hand forward. He didn't cling. He didn't panic when she shifted her weight. He stayed close for a few minutes, then glanced back toward the habitat, with the easy confidence of an animal who knows where he belongs and is no longer afraid of the distance between one world and another. Before Emily stood to leave, he returned one final time. He pressed his hand gently near hers through the barrier, held it there for a moment, then turned and walked back toward his life. Emily didn't try to hold the moment longer than it lasted. She stood up, thanked the staff quietly, and walked to her car. She sat there for a while before driving, not because she was sad, because some things take a moment to carry correctly. Kavi may have spent his first weeks of life believing that one woman's jacket was the whole world, but the greatest thing Emily ever gave him was not her presence. It was the patience to make herself unnecessary, and in the end that is the only kind of love that truly sets anything free.